Hey, what's up, guys? My name is Gavin Schall. Today I'm joined by XJ of Knicks Film School fame to discuss the Knicks' loss to the Celtics and what it portends for a potential playoff matchup between the two teams.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's up, guys? You are Locked On Knicks, and today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. And I want to thank you for making Locked On Knicks your first listen today and every day, because we are now available on all platforms. So if you want to be an everydayer, the steps you have to take are very simple. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube and hit that notifications bell to ensure you never, ever miss an episode. And then be sure to do the same on your podcast platform of choice. And then if you want to take things to the next level, subscribe to our Subtext so you can text us about the Knicks and we can text you back. But who would you be texting? I'm Gavin Schall, longtime play-by-play broadcaster who's been covering the NBA for about a decade now. Man, it has flown by. And for a couple of years, a credentialed media member covering the Phoenix Suns. And today I'm joined by XJ. You've seen his work all over the Knicks Twitter sphere to talk about this loss to the Boston Celtics. We decided to take more of a big picture approach, and we'll get into it right now on Locked On Knicks. All right, guys, as promised, we are joined by XJ, the legend over from Knicks Film School, who also co-hosts the podcast Hot Hand Theory. XJ, welcome to the show, man. This is a long time in the making. I'm excited to get to talk to you. Bummed that it was not the best game to talk about.
Hey, Gavin, I'm just happy to be here with you and chopping up Knicks basketball with you. I don't mind talking about that Celtics game because I actually think there are a lot of interesting insights to take away in terms of projecting forward, how things may look when we actually have a healthy roster to talk about. So I think there's some stuff to take away from it, and just happy to be here and talk hoops with you.
You and I were kind of going over pre-show, like, how are we going to structure this? A little inside baseball, but it's normally something we would do to end a show to be like, all right, what can we take away from this game? But I was like, you know what? Like, that's really the only thing that matters, because obviously, if you didn't know, the Knicks were missing some key pieces in this one. Obviously, still no Julius Randle, still no OG Anunoby, still no Mitchell Robinson. We're able to keep it close for a half despite that, because Jalen Brunson went nuclear, but it didn't. I mean, this might be revisionist history because I was watching after I knew the final score, but it never felt sustainable. Like, you just heard, oh, the Celtics are shooting 66%. Didn't feel like the Knicks had the matchups in the second half. The Celtics 8 straight threes at one point, just completely ran away with it. Knicks cut it to 10 or 9 rather. Celtics went on a 10-0 run from there. It was not a game that the Knicks ever felt like they had any business winning. And in my mind, like, that's what it should be when the Knicks are missing 3 of their top 6 guys. I personally think this might be sacrilegious to say on a Knicks podcast. I think the Celtics are far and away the best team in the league. I think it is a total and complete failure if they don't win the title this year. They are beautifully built. Something has to go horrifically wrong, like it seems to most years in the playoffs for them not to win. All that being said, XJ, with all the missing guys going up against a great team, like, what were sort of your first thoughts when we started that conversation in terms of like, all right, this is interesting. Like, I think this part carries over to a potential conference finals, conference semifinals matchup between the two teams.
Yeah, I think the first thing that I think of is it's interesting to see what the Celtics want to do defensively with the Knicks. And to me, it seems really clear. Obviously, the big thing was that they were in this deep drop against Brunson. It's like, oh, you can't play this drop against Brunson. You're going to get killed. You know, Brunson's a drop killer, as we might say. But really, they're okay with him doing all the things that he wants to do as long as he's not getting to the rim and or, you know, kind of throwing those soft floaters off the rim for offensive rebounds. They're okay with him pulling up for 3 with a guy rear contesting. They're okay with him getting to his mid-range bag. And so it's interesting to see that, because you're not going to outscore the Celtics with, you know, contested 3s and mid-range 2s. Like, you're just not going to beat them that way. So I thought that was particularly interesting. I have been watching the Celtics really closely because, as you said, Gavin, I think they're clearly and far and away the best team in the league. And I'm not a fan of Boston as a city, but, you know, they are fun to watch in terms of the talent that they put out there and how beautifully built they are. And also how well coached they are. Honestly, they give up a ton of 3s, but it's really by design, because you're not going to outshoot them. And they are really selective about which 3s they give up. So they give up a ton of 3s, but not many corner 3s. And I really like something I also noticed about the game. I really like how Derek White in particular he's so smart about closing out depending on the player. Like, he closes out differently. So you'll see him do a soft closeout to like Josh Hart in the corner, but then he'll hard close out to DiVincenzo, run him off the line. And so I think that the Knicks are going to need somebody like Josh Hart to actually shoot his threes and actually make them. And that'll be a critical difference maker. So that's some of what I saw really. Is just like, okay, how are the Celtics going to play the Knicks and particularly Brunson? At least defensively, that's what I saw. And offensively, they seem to want to really attack Brunson, which makes a ton of sense. It's kind of funny. I think we see a lot of teams wait until like the fourth quarter to start like attacking a player defensively. I'm not sure why we see that so often, but the Celtics didn't really do that. They were like, hey, we're going to go after Brunson early and often. We're going to make you try to either help and try to recover to our beautifully spaced out shooters all over the court, or you're going to just let Brunson have to deal with like Jaylen Brown in the post or Drew Holiday in the post or something like that. So the Knicks are going to have to find solutions for those things regardless of who's healthy or not. And I think things will be easier with our full strength roster, especially OG Anunoby in particular. But those are things that we're going to have to try to find solutions for regardless.
Yeah, a lot of the same stuff stood out to me. I mean, I just thought, Derek White and Drew Holiday, like it just feels distinctly different than going up against, I would say, any other team in the NBA. And like, I thought it ultimately like affected Dante DiVincenzo even more than Jalen Brunson. Like DiVincenzo's first shot of the game is just like a three that he's been making. Like it was kind of like a catch. Like he was like slightly fading on it, like maybe a foot longer than he wanted, but like a reasonable shot. And Derek White, just like his arm just seemed to go forever and like got this great contest on it. And it's this combination of White, who's like probably, maybe I'm forgetting someone obvious, but like probably like the best shot blocking guard in the NBA, like guard sized guard. And then Drew Holiday, who's like about as good in screen navigation as anyone. And you just set, and you set a screen on Drew Holiday, and it's almost like it was never set. Like I was really impressed. Like Hartenstein, like actually like stopped him like once or twice. And that was great. And like maybe Mitch with his big body can do a little bit of that, but it was just over and over again, like Holiday, like catching up. And like, again, like Brunson just has such a deep bag. Like he's still able to get to his shots, able to get to his spots, but you could see him tire out. Like part of that like lack of sustainability I mentioned was from like Brunson accounting for, I think it was ultimately 18 of the Knicks' first 21 points. And he was a total one-man offense. And again, with Julius Randle, you don't necessarily have that concern. The concern with Julius Randle back is how the Celtics played him in the first game of the season, where they put Drew Holiday on him. And it seemed to like truly like F with his head. And like, obviously he was still acclimating back from that ankle injury, but like, he was like, I'm like, it was like, he reverted back to base form. It was like, man, small Julius kill, right? And it's like, no, Julius do not kill. He's freaking amazing. And it's just like the gears just froze a little bit. I think the way Randle, like if he can get back into the form he had earlier this season, it's a little bit different, but it's more so like, all right, if they're going to guard Brunson like that and basically be like, you want to try to drop 60 for 4 straight games on us, be our guest. Like, how can the ancillary Knicks take advantage? And even after getting Bojan and Bergson nominally like shoring up their creation, like that's where I still have my hesitation. Because like, all right, can you actually like keep those guys on the floor defensively? Like, can they throw enough at Randle that he gets into a little bit of trouble? Anunoby, like where he was playing really well before he got hurt, was like creating shots and like doing stuff that like I can't say he's never done that at Toronto. He certainly wasn't doing that his first 10 or so games on the Knicks. Like, does all that stuff translate against Boston? And maybe these questions are like first world problems. Again, Boston probably should beat the Knicks. But in terms of like New York actually having a chance, like I think those are sort of the biggest things they have to answer. It basically comes down to like, can you get creation outside of Brunson without your defense falling apart?
Yeah, I mean, you touched on so many important things. I'll start with that last one that you just said. To me, even more so, and this may be blasphemous, and I'm okay with that, even more so than Julius Randle, OG Anunoby will be the key to our ability to compete, the Knicks' ability to compete with the Celtics. I think that you are going to need some creation juice from OG Anunoby. And the reason I say that is because you need OG Anunoby's defense to be able to protect and insulate all of these other weak defenders that we have to have on the court at various points in time, particularly Brunson and particularly either Bojan or Randle, right? Like, I don't think teams really see Julius Randle as like someone to target, but we do know that his overall impact on defense tends to be on the lower side and lower than what he should be actually capable of. And some of that is his off-ball defense. Some of that is like effort at times. And hopefully we don't see a lower effort in the playoff situation. But at the same time, I think you need OG Anunoby to recover and keep teams in front of him, and then make up for a lot of the mistakes that some of the other players may make. I think the cool thing about OG Anunoby in particular is his ability to play defense really well from a disadvantaged position. And I think that that's going to be key, because he's going to be in a lot of disadvantages and be able to kind of erase those, right? Like either in closeout situations, recovery situations, playing from behind situations. And I think OG Anunoby is just going to have to be all over the place. He's going to have to be a monster. And to me, that's going to be key. What you were saying about White and Holiday, that tandem of White and Holiday is relentless. There's no breaks. Those guys are all over the place. I was looking at some data earlier. Derek White, I think Derek White is probably the Celtics' best perimeter defender. And it's crazy to say that on a team that has Drew Holiday on it. But Derek White is 185th in the league in fouls per 36 minutes. So he does not foul. And that's despite taking on some of the quickest and craftiest guards in the league on a nightly basis. And if you look at it this way, per 36 minutes, he's averaging more stocks, so more steals and blocks at 2.5 than fouls at 2.3.
It's crazy. He's not playing conservative defense.
No, he's not playing conservative. He's not like one of these guys you're hiding on a wing in the corner and he's not going to give up fouls because he's not really involved in the actions. He's involved in a ton of actions, but he's not fouling. He just is able to hold his ground, stay on his feet. I felt like he was the best defender on Brunson by far in terms of like individual defense. I felt like Brunson got the better of everybody, including Brown, including Holiday, including Tatum at some points.
And one on Porzingis. So that
on Porzingis, yeah. Absolutely. Except for Derek White, who is able to stay on the ground. He's not going for any pump fakes. You're not getting him out of position. He's going to rear contest everything. He's going to be lurking with those long arms. You can never just be like, okay, I got a screen. I got rid of that Derek White guy. He's out of the play. Like, no, he's lurking and he's waiting, and his timing's tremendous. So I think that tandem is going to be really, really extremely difficult to contend with. And so we will need the spacing. And with that comes guys like Bojan and Burks, who, I know Knicks fans are kind of fed up with them already. And I would definitely preach patience. Because I do think we're going to need their shooting in terms of their spot up shooting to space out the court. But in order for those guys to be able to stay on the court, we're going to need OG Anunoby to make up for a lot of mistakes, to make up a lot of ground, to play at a disadvantage and constantly be able to win despite that disadvantage defensively. So that's kind of what I'm looking for. OG Anunoby, I think, is the key to be able to really compete with this Boston team.
All right, guys, we're going to pick up with XJ, continuing to talk why OG Anunoby is absolutely essential for the Knicks, why they need the healthiest version of Isaiah Hartenstein, and what to look for from Bogey and Burks. But before we do that, I want to tell you about our buddies over at Grammarly. Grammarly is your AI writing partner to help you communicate more effectively and efficiently so you can make a bigger impact at work. For my job outside of hosting Locked On Knicks, I am constantly sending emails, whether it's to coaches to get information on players, or as a freelance broadcaster, I am frequently applying for new jobs. And I just never, ever, ever want to have a grammatical mistake in those emails, because it just totally robs you of your credibility. And even if you're totally qualified, even if you're going to kill it at that job, you might never have the opportunity with one or two typos. Grammarly makes those typos a thing of the past. 96% of Grammarly users report that Grammarly helps them craft more impactful writing. Grammarly works across 500,000 apps and websites. By understanding your writing and context, Grammarly provides relevant, personalized suggestions. Their tone suggestions help you navigate even the most difficult work conversations. So it goes beyond just grammar. They actually help you shape the content of your work. And if you're not the strongest writer in the world, it can be an incredible asset. So make a bigger impact at work with Grammarly. Sign up and download for free at Grammarly.com/podcast. That's GRAMMARLY.com/podcast. Easier said, done. Yeah, it was so, I mean, again, you took the word, excuse me, literally took my words away, took my breath away. Great point. I wrote down basically the same thing about OG in my notes, because it was just like all these different, like, just like when the Celtics were getting 8 threes, like I was just kind of tracking like what they were doing. Like each time I was like, all right, well, if they had Anunoby to like the solution was basically if Anunoby could guard 2 guys at once. Like, I don't really know what you do. Like maybe another team's like had a better solution, and someone who like watches like 10 hours of like the league every night, like would give me an answer on this. But like, what do you do when they have the Tatum KP like pick and pop, and like 2 stick with Tatum, and if 2 don't stick with Tatum, he's like turning the corner, going down for a dunk, and like either getting a dunk or spraying it out to someone else for an open 3. And then if you keep 2 with him, like he threw the same exact pass. I think it was the very first game of the season against the Celtics where he just went behind his back, and KP's just hitting. Like, what was the stat? Like, he's 4th in the NBA in threes from 27 plus feet. Like, it is absurd. And I almost think like that move for Porzingis, like, probably should win the Celtics the title. And like, it's like I was advocating, and like it was like not the most popular opinion at the time, but like for the Knicks to like try and go for him, and like maybe trade Mitchell Robinson for him, and like and you can just see what a skeleton key he is. And like, of course, like there's always the risk that he gets hurt, and like the assets you gave up to him, like you're like, all right, well that's in the dust now because he's not even playing. But when he is out there, like I just don't think there are a lot of answers on either end. And it just sort of feels like over and over again, like especially with the guys out, like the Knicks need 2 guys to do what 1 guy on the Celtics can do. And that's what I keep coming back to in this matchup. But to your point, like if Anunoby like can just play in rotation and fly around, like it's going to be tough, but like there is a world where you could beat this team 4 guys. If Jalen Brunson just has a series of his life, if Julius Randle has a series of his life, just because you're going to have that rim protection. I think an important thing to remember here is, or maybe not remember, but note, I don't think Isaiah Hartenstein is like particularly close to 100% right now. Like I know he played a little bit better this game. He had a few offensive rebounds, had that one play where he went at Tatum and drew the foul, but it's just not the same level of like rabies fueled ferocity that like we've basically seen from him since the second half of last year. And you get Mitch on, and like obviously Mitch is like not the best matchup for Porzingis, but when Porzingis is off the court, like he can help you with their offensive rebound. And there are different ways you can hit at the Celtics that the Knicks just weren't able to in this game. And it's worth noting, like Bojan just had a terrible game shooting the basketball. And like, it wasn't like the Celtics were like giving him impossible shots. Like he missed 2 different wide open threes, missed that layup at the end of the first quarter. Burks was 1 for 7 from 3. And it's not saying like, all right, those guys are going to like match the Celtics mano-a-mano, but this did feel sort of like the worst case scenario for the Knicks outside of Jalen Brunson having an incredible game. And outside of the fact that, like you mentioned, Josh Hart, like shooting threes is a key. Like he's been super aggressive and by his standard, super accurate since the All-Star break. And tonight or last night was another example of him. I mean, just playing fantastic ball.
Yeah, so Gavin, it was your turn to take my breath away and take my words away because I said the same.
Surprisingly romantic podcast.
So. I wasn't expecting it. Who would have thought? But I talked about this game with GMAC Andrew Claudio on the Knicks Film School post game yesterday or after the game, and I made the same exact point about Isaiah Hartenstein. We talked about OG's not there, Randall's not there. And we can't forget, like, Hartenstein kind of is not there as well. Like, he is clearly on, still on some kind of minutes restriction. And he's just not all there. His lift is not there. Again, I mean, I think you described it in a perfect, like, imagery. You know, he didn't have that rabies-fueled ferocity. I think that was a great way to describe it because that's the way he played. And he played such great defense that I genuinely felt at points in the season like this guy should be a candidate for Defensive Player of the Year. Like, that, I did not feel like that was an overstatement. So we didn't get that Isaiah Hartenstein, and we're going to need that Isaiah Hartenstein. But if you think about having Hartenstein on the court, and then if Mitchell Robinson gets back, I think that changes a lot as well, being able to have that flexibility for the lineup. Something I also noticed was that Bojan Bogdanovic played his first minutes with Isaiah Hartenstein since he's been a New York Knick in that game. And that's going to be really important because Bojan's defense is not good. And I'll be the first to admit I didn't watch a ton of Detroit Pistons basketball earlier this season. So I know Bojan's defensive impact numbers were not good. But I just want to see, like, why? Is it an effort thing? Is it a physical ability thing? Why is his defensive impact kind of low? And to me, it seems like all of the above, to be honest. There were a couple plays. There was one that stood out to me where, the Knicks were getting back in transition and Isaiah Hartenstein is pointing for Bogdanovic to pick up Jaylen Brown in the corner. And he's just yelling, get Brown. And then he doesn't for some reason. And then iHeart's like, okay, I'll go pick him up. And he picks him up and then he gets blown by for a dunk. And then you look to the right, it's like Bogdanovic is just like there as well. He's like didn't guard anyone, didn't help out on the drive. And that kind of thing is like super frustrating. But I do want to give Bojan some grace there because he has only spent time since he's been a Knick with kind of like Precious Achiuwa and Jericho Sims at the 5. And even maybe a couple possessions with Taj Gibson at the 5. Like that's not the combination. That's not a winning combination for him. You're gonna get his spacing, but you're gonna lose so much defensively if your front line is like Bojan and Precious Achiuwa. Like that's not gonna work. But if he gets to have more time with Isaiah Hartenstein and potentially Mitchell Robinson, I think we'll be able to see some of his defensive shortcomings be insulated from those guys, from that rim protection that's going to be on the court. And that'll allow him to still have his positive impact overall, his positive net impact through the offensive side of the ball. So that's something else I've been looking at as well.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that like both in Detroit and I think in like his very limited games on the Knicks, like both teams were much better when he was playing small forward instead of power forward. And in terms of how Tom Thibodeau wants to play, you can generally, with the exception of Josh Hart this year, you can push everyone like a position down from their natural position. And that's where they're going to end up. And obviously you have Mitch and Hart, like you're more likely to get to those lineups where he is like a slightly smaller guy. And there's just more bodies, more length around the rim, it insulates the word I've been using too. And I think there was just like, I mean, even starting from the first Celtics game, like I had like this deep pit in my stomach with the Knicks before the Anunoby trade that like they just weren't like big enough or physical enough at the end of the day. And that felt weird because like, all right, it's like trading Obi Toppin shouldn't have meant that. But even last year, like they were like when even the game where they beat the Celtics where quickly just went off, like it just felt by like the skin of their teeth. And you were just hoping like every Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum 3, like, all right, come on, just rattle out. And like every Knick shot, you're like, oh, amazing play. But it like, I'll go back to that word. It didn't feel sustainable. And it just felt like what happened to the Cavs against the Knicks was inevitably going to happen to the Knicks. Like when they ran, like went into the Celtics, like even like when they played the Pelicans earlier this year, it felt that way. The first time they played the Timberwolves, where it was like a close game for a half and the Timberwolves just ran away with it. And Anunoby just flipped that on its head and we became the bullies. And it's why it's such a shame that he wasn't like even beyond like him and Randall together is like a different animal, but just him being healthy for this game, like you just could have learned so much more because I wanted to see like, is there any way like the Knicks can make the Celtics like feel them in that sense? And Porzingis for like everything he does well, like is not a great rebounder. And like, can the Knicks like as much as he would torture Mitchell Robinson, can Mitch torture him a little bit? And the Celtics are long and like they're certainly not small, but they're also not big necessarily. Like they're big in terms of rim protection, but they're not big in terms of rebounding. And I just wonder if there's a world where the Knicks can like lean like deeply into Tibbs ball and XG. I know your guys into the numbers and analytics. Like you could probably come back and be, well, 3 is more than 2. And that seems to be like, for better or worse, Joe Mazzulla is like guiding philosophy to this whole Celtics team. But that like maybe just bakes in enough variance that like the Knicks can win some games like really, really ugly against this team. All right, guys, we're going to wrap things up with XJ talking about some of the lineups that would give the Knicks the best chance in a potential series against the Boston Celtics. But before we do that, I wanted to tell you about our buddies over at Stitch Fix. You know that instant confidence boost you get from an outfit that makes you look really good? That's what I get with Stitch Fix. Stitch Fix has been a game changer for me personally. They allow you to easily upgrade your wardrobe with a professional stylist that helps you find new on-trend favorites that will work for you. All I had to do was give the stylist my size, style, and budget preferences. I ordered boxes when I want, how I want, no subscription required, and they send 5 just for me pieces, plus outfit recommendations and pro styling advice. I keep what works, and I just send back the rest. My stylist always sends just the right pieces, and the fit is on point. It's like having style ESP. I don't know how they do it, but they just get me. And if you don't love something, just send it back. Shipping, returns, and exchanges are always free. Style that makes you feel as good as you look. Get started today at stitchfix.com/lockedon. That's stitchfix.com/lockedon. stitchfix.com/lockedon.
Yeah, and I think it's true. I think that's right, honestly. And I think the only issue with it, in my opinion, is that, and maybe this is just where the Knicks are, but that puts you in a position where you're just hoping that the Celtics miss shots. And you're like, if the Celtics miss shots, in 4 of 7 games, we have a chance. But it doesn't really put you in a power position to take the series. It puts you in a position to kind of hope that they allow you to win the series based on their poor shooting. So, and to be honest, the Celtics are so good, that might be the position that anybody who plays them is in. It just might be. They're just so good that it's like, what do we give up? What do we give up to this team? If you want to do your help and recover scheme, they're going to get open threes. And we see they make open threes so consistently. I mean, you mentioned the Porzingis deep spacing. I think that's incredible for them. If Porzingis is spacing out to 27 feet from the top of the key and he's knocking it down like easily, what do you do? Like I don't really see many answers. And I'm not an NBA coach, but the NBA coaches don't seem to have many answers as well. So
yeah, can we phrase it like this? Like, what's the most flexible defensive lineup the Knicks can put out there? And I ask that because like where my brain goes is like, if the Knicks get this version of Josh Hart that can shoot 38% from 3 on high, like I think that opens up lineups that just weren't tenable against the Heat because it was so destructive to have Hart on the floor passing up threes. And like I wonder, like, can you get to like Brunson, Hart, OG, Randall, and Mitch or Hart like to end games? And that was like pretty unpalatable for me. Like, and I especially after DiVincenzo cooked, I'm like, all right, what more does this guy have to do? But like watching this, like I think it's just more of a Hart series than it is a DiVincenzo series.
Yeah, I think that's an incredible point. And I do want to shout out Josh Hart because I've been pretty down on Josh Hart so far this season. It's just been like not bringing the same level of intensity like on a nightly basis. And even when he does, it's like, well, the shooting's not there. So it's like last year, the reason why Josh Hart was so incredible is because he did all the Josh Hart things and shot great from 3. I mean, at least towards the end of the regular season. And it's like, yeah, if we have that Josh Hart, that's a super powered Josh Hart that is a complete difference maker. And I don't think he needs to shoot whatever he did as a Knick, once he was traded to the Knicks and spent the rest of the regular season with them. I think it was like in the 40s in terms of percentages. We don't need a 40% from 3 Josh Hart. We just need a 36, 37% from 3 Josh Hart who is down to shoot open threes, whether they're from the corner or slightly above the break. And I think that makes all the difference because, as you suggested, Gavin, like that gives you so much lineup flexibility. And when you have Hart and you're able to put Hart at the 2, that does change everything. And you're only able to do it if he's willing to take and knock down threes. And I really actually think of it more in terms of what they can do with the bench unit. So I think of, are there situations where we can have, like, let's say Deuce or Burks out there, then Hart at the 2, OG and Bojan, in the front line with Hartenstein or Mitch. Like, I think that would be a perfect mix of offense and defense. You have enough creation to spare Brunson a few minutes, and you have enough spacing if Josh Hart is shooting well that you should be able to score with that lineup. And then defensively, that lineup's going to be really good. So I think that Josh Hart is really critical in that way. And I'm glad you brought him up because, he's going to be maximum Josh Hart in the playoffs. The energy is going to be there. He's going to be flying in. If you kind of leave him wide open from 3, he needs to shoot those threes. But not only that, when you leave him wide open for 3, that gives him a huge runway to fly in there and grab some offensive rebounds as well. Especially, if the Knicks are able to shoot threes, we're going to get some of those long rebounds, and that's the Josh Hart specialty. So yeah, I think Josh Hart is a huge difference maker along with OG Anunoby. Those might be my 2 in terms of a Celtics Knicks series. If we get Josh Hart who's able to shoot and does everything else, and if we get OG Anunoby, the version that we saw, before the injury, I think that gives the Knicks a fighting chance.
Yeah, and I think you can, like, to me, that's the series like where like Tibbs wants to just like kind of batter down the encampments. I don't know if that's a real phrase. But like it's just some military phrase where it's like, all right, we're putting everything on lock. Like we're only playing 8 guys. Like I like the idea of DiVincenzo playing backup point guard in that series. And maybe this is the wrong night to make this point because I thought Deuce was like maybe the 3rd best Knick in this game. I might be forgetting someone, but like he was awesome. Like I loved like him getting Jason Tatum on him, and like last year that would have been like the quickest, like I am passing this ball to like anyone else. Like even if it's to the other team, like I'm not letting this guy near me. And he just kind of like surveyed him up and like barbecued him and hit a second jumper in his face. It's like a little father-son violence, at least from a name perspective. And then like there was another possession where like Drew Holiday, like to your point on Derek White, like knowing the scouting report, like Drew Holiday like had this great closeout on Deuce McBride, like knowing he wants to shoot that corner three, and Deuce panicked and traveled, and you heard Tom Thibodeau just scream at him like, shoot the ball. And then next possession, like hop step into a three. Like it was a solid game for Deuce. So I don't want to totally take him off the table, especially because of like just how scrappy he is defensively. But in terms of just being a little bit bigger, we just watched like Dante DiVincenzo like kind of battle for his manhood over and over again against Jaylen Brown. And the idea of like him like instead getting to like battle like Derek White in like a second unit, like I think he can make a difference there and provide spacing and like provide creation. And with DiVincenzo, like it just feels like the margins in terms of his ability to score at the rim are so good, because it's just not an area where he's been particularly good in his career. And then over this recent like hot stretch, like all of a sudden, like he's taking advantage of the fact that probably for the first time in his NBA career, like teams are guarding him 27 feet now and like getting into the lane and finishing. But tonight, like you could see like over and over again, like him, like Tatum swatting his shot, or him like taking like this flying like runner, like underhand runner, just because like Porzingis was like in the vicinity at the basket. And it just like, it doesn't take much for him to go from an efficient guy at the rim to an inefficient guy at the rim, especially because he's just not he's almost the reverse of Quentin Grimes, where like he is looking to shoot every time and he's just not a great passer. And 1 point missed Precious Achiuwa wide open under the basket. That was a great point your fellow KFS guy DJ Zulo made when he was on the pod. But I say all that to say like when the margins get smaller, like you just have to kind of shift your rotation and shift the roles of certain guys. And it feels like Hart's just defensively anyways, like a little bit more likely to hang. I'm trying to remember it. I had a point I wanted to make about Julius Randle, but I'll throw it back to you, XJ, because I cannot come up with it at the moment.
No, it's all good. And if you think of it, jump in. But I think that's well said, and it's probably true. I'm a little bit higher on Deuce's flexibility in terms of defensively, point of attack defense, and ability to knock down shots. But to me, it's more of like, do I really necessarily want Alec Burks playing instead of Deuce McBride? I'd be fine with both of them kind of being benched. And I like the idea, not benched, but not playing very much in an important playoff series. But I do like the idea of DiVincenzo potentially stepping up as that backup point guard, especially when you have OG Anunoby on the court and maybe Julius Randle, when you have enough creation, you can kind of put it all together and say, hey, we'll have enough to make an offense work with these guys. I think that would work potentially really well. So I do like that. To your point about kind of, Tibbs, I forget the phrase that you used that we weren't sure if it was a real phrase or not. I don't think it's a real phrase. Go ahead. No, I think it could be true, but this is from an analytics standpoint. I am concerned, and I was last year, about their approach with, the offensive rebounding strategy. And it's something I want to say I kind of sounded the alarms on last year, like pretty early in the season. First, I wanted to give them a lot of credit for doing it, for being able to manufacture a really effective offense without being efficient at shooting the basketball. That's incredible to do. And they did it extremely well and played to the strengths of the team that they had. But I do want to say, like, so for instance, the last 3 of the last 4 games the Knicks have played, they have an offensive rebound rate of over 41%, which is crazy. 41.5% against Houston, 42.5% against Orlando, and 41% against Boston. Those are 3 losses. And I know it's, I know that the team is not at full strength, but those resulted in kind of like mediocre offensive performances. The defense has not been good without OG Anunoby, and so that's something to consider. But I also think that in this playoff context, we saw last year, they went with that same approach. We're going to get the offensive rebounds. We're going to win the possession battle. We're going to get a bunch of shots. We're going to outshoot you in terms of our shot attempts. But it doesn't always work out and lead to really good offenses, and especially in a playoff context. So I'm a little concerned about that, and that's why I was happy that we got a guy like Bojan Bogdanovic, who I think is going to be able to change that dynamic. We're going to be able to actually score the basketball on their first shot attempt instead of needing 2 or 3 to score. So I think there's a balance there. They're going to have to win the offensive rebounding battle against the Celtics. There's no question. They have to do that. If they don't, forget about it. It's a sweep. But they're going to have to do that and more. And so you're going to need the shooting to be able to execute that well as well.
Yeah, no, I And it's sort of been my question all season, like especially before the OG trade, like they were great on offense again, but we saw this show last year where they were third best offense in the NBA, second worst offense in the playoffs, and it's just like how much more sustainable is it? And so much of it comes down to Julius Randle just being close to the same guy. And I kind of think Boston in some ways is just the worst possible matchup for him. And they can even if Randall's just a substantially better player and in a substantially better place, they can just replicate a lot of what the Hawks did against him and better. And his decision making is just gonna have to be so good, so on point, because you just have these split second windows against them. And maybe there's a world where all right, if they're gonna put Jason Tatum on him, he can just put him under the rim. But again, Holiday did such a good job, and with Porzingis looming there, it's really tough. The thesis of this podcast is the Celtics are really good. Hopefully, the Knicks at the end of the day will not have to face them. But if they did, I think we came up with some suggestions that could help. But XJ, before I let you go, man, can you let everyone know where they can find all your great work?
Yeah, I appreciate it, Gavin. Appreciate you guys having me on. I do work for Knicks Film School. I have a podcast on there called Casual Fridays with my colleagues Mensa and Sean with the W. Those drop every Friday as long as the Knicks don't play on Thursday. Apparently this season the Knicks play every Thursday, so they've been a little few and far between, but you can catch us on there. And also I have an independent podcast that I do with my buddy Jeff, or Frank Barrett, on Twitter. It's called Hot Hand Theory. Really all about looking at the game in some non-traditional ways, breaking down the game from an analytical perspective. And yeah, we just try to make data more interesting and more fun through the use of analogies, hypotheticals, theorizing about some stuff that might never happen but would be fun to imagine, and combining that with metrics and film study. So that's what we do over there.
It's a must listen. Will absolutely make you a smarter Knicks, smarter NBA fan, and I like that it's not all analytics. It's analytics and film and how they interact, and to me that's the best way to cover the game. So I love what you guys do. Love what everyone at the KFS crew does, and hopefully the Knicks are incorporating some of this stuff as well. Seems like they are a little smarter than the Knicks teams have passed them. But until next time, he's XJ. I'm Gavin. We'll talk to you soon on Locked On Knicks.